I am now. All right, so we're going to illustrate the perspective. I'm going to do the more of an aerial view. And I'm going to show you, if you'll notice on this perspective, well, first, before I do that, one thing when you print from SketchUp, unless you set it to do it, and I don't even know if you can do that in the free version, it does it in actual 3-point perspective. So your vertical lines aren't vertical. Take a look at, I show lines for these trees. You'll notice that's kind of going off like that. But when I look at these trees, it's kind of going off like that. That's because there's actually a measuring point, a vanishing point way down here. We don't take that into account. We just go all vertical. So you're going to be faking it a little bit here, but it's not that hard. Now, what I'm going to do first is sketch. And it doesn't take a long time, 5, maybe 10 minutes, but it is the most important part of this exercise. That should work. All right, got my trace down. I'm breaking out a pencil. First things first, I've got all these trees. I'm just going to go ahead and put a straight line up there from the base of the tree up. I can't even tell where these are. We'll assume there's one there and one there. Looks like I got a big one there, and a big one there, and a big one here. All right. These front trees, you know, I'm basically going to put some blobs in, just some circles. I'm going to make them all about the same height. I'm also seeing that they want to be kind of tall and narrow as opposed to short and fat. Okay, I've then got probably a pretty good sized tree here. And I've got a couple big trees back here behind the house. Let's just go ahead and put those in. I'm just putting them in as blobs. We had those propane tanks back here, which I didn't draw in, but I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple straight lines in and just a quick sketch to show where they were. If I remember correctly, this had a little stick between it. I'm going to go ahead and try and find some vanishing points. Oh, I got lucky. All right, I brought these lines back. You'll notice that hits right on the horizon line. There's the horizon line. Okay, and this allows me to go to this vanishing point and just lightly put in a couple guidelines so that when I go to put texture on, I'm not totally hunting in the dark. Now this side, the vanishing point's going to be way over like here. but I can follow the windows and maybe just put a couple in where the mullions are. Just follow them, and that way when I go to put my texture in, I'll have some guides there for me. I'm just going along the tops and middles of the windows for these. Okay, next I want to figure out how do I frame this? And I'm going to want to do some other trees because I've got all this background here. One of the problems with doing an aerial view, if you looked at this one, when we were down at the street, well, how do I take care of the sides? It's simple. Tree, 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 done. Okay, well, now I've got all this ground I've got to render. So I'm going to want to get a bunch of trees. I know, in fact, this is into a hill, and I'm going to put a bunch of trees in there. So I'm going to get a tree here. I don't like to stop them right on the horizon line. So let's make this one a little bigger than the horizon line. Let's get a couple more back here. And I'm going to put another one here. And I'm going to get another one here. All right, so I've pretty much covered up that horizon line. I can put a little stripe in here if I want. Here, let's put a little stripe in. And I do my background stripe a little bit lower than it needs to be. I'm going to get rid of a tree or two. I'm going to bring those up a little. We'll make that our background stripe. And I'll put another tree. I'm just going to leave it right there. I'll just leave the stripe there and maybe even put a little bit of a stripe out here. Have the stripe come out a little there. One of the problems with doing perspectives is the foreground. How much do you show? I've got the front of the road here. Kind of see that. There's a driveway. Ooh, I got a bunch. I got a stone wall here. I'm going to just sketch something in there. At least I think that's a stone wall. Driveway, driveway, walkway. Okay, so what happens is the more in the foreground I show, the more I have to illustrate, and you wind up with this big wide road in the front. So I tend to shrink the foreground as much as I can. And I'm going to do it right about, yep, that'll work. All right, I'm going to, yeah, you know, I could even bring it up a little more. I want to get the whole end of that driveway in. So, and I actually don't like cutting it off quite that close. I'm going to put it here. Oh, I can see a little more of that driveway. Now, I like to do the same thing in that I got a tree here, I got a tree there. I'm going to go ahead and add another tree here. And I'm going to chop off my ground right there and right about here. Doing the same thing to leave a tree hanging off the edge. I'm going to play some games with that driveway in a minute. For the sky, I'm going to bring that sky in a little bit, and I'm going to go a little higher. Yeah, that'll work. Nope. Okay, so now what I've done is I've got the frame for my picture, I've got the trees blocked out, I've got where the stripe is, I've put some help lines on the roofs and on the front, so that when I go to put texture in, that's all available to me. It hasn't taken me a great deal of time. And, I mean, it looks ratty, there's not much to it, but it's gonna serve its purpose very well in a few minutes. So now what we're gonna do, but you have to do this, all right? You really need to take the 10 to 15 minutes, or 5, you can do it in 5 if you're quick, to just lay this out. Because this is gonna be what's gonna guide you for the rest of your drawing. So now once that's done, we're gonna move on to ink. And this becomes tracing, which we're all wicked good at. If you're using a scanner to capture your drawings, when you're putting in your borders, you want to make sure you don't make it too big to scan. So remember, I mean, if you've got an 8.5 by 11 scanner, make sure that you don't go higher than 8.5. I'm close, but I think it'll fit. Let's bring that down a little. Hey, get in line. Now, it's sort of like doing your elevations. However, you don't get to use your triangle very much to do straight up and down lines. Or you get to use your triangle, but you don't get to use this to draw straight lines across, because all the lines go back to vanishing points. So I'm going to start with, oh, you know what I didn't do is sketch in a chimney. I'm going to do it real white. Okay, I'll just draw over that. First thing I'm going to do, make sure my pen writes, and it does. I'm going to get some of these trees in for real, especially the ones in the foreground, because I don't want to draw my building through them. So now when I'm doing trees in a row like this, what I don't do is start at the left and go to 1, 2, 3, because then they look like they're all behind each other. So what I'll do, sure, we'll do 1. Yeah, I'll skip it. The other thing you'll notice is that when I put these in, it just blocked out like 40% of my drawing of the building.
Nice.
I noticed that.
Which is awesome. And especially for you, you can especially get away with it because folks typically will know what the building looks like. You're trying to highlight what the landscaping looks like. Got this guy here, which is a little puffier.
Do you think about what it is
For a tree?
when you're drawing it? Yeah, because that's To me, I'm like, that's a row of arborvitaes.
Um,
What are you gonna put right
That's
there?
exactly what I was thinking it was. I don't when I'm doing my sketches, because usually I don't know at that point. If someone were to tell me what it was, then I would probably look it up and try and be accurate with it. It's just usually, for me, again, architecturally, I'm usually winding up doing these sketches long before anybody's really thought out the landscaping, because I tend to do this stuff early in the design process. So, I throw a bunch of trees in and call it good. And I make them green. And that's all I have to do. You should probably pay more attention to it, again, because you're going, hey, I want to show a row of arborvitae. Now, I tell you exactly what an arborvitae look like, but I don't know.
That's pretty close.
Okay, so it looks a lot like those,
You're
huh?
nailing it.
There we go. Great, that's awesome. So now, the next one I do, I'll say, this could be a row of arborvitae. And they'll go, oh, he knows everything.
Yeah, you could be really influencing people's like plant choices.
I had a friend of mine who had a college art teacher who was in architecture, apparently, and he had done some illustration, and he did a building, and he threw some trees on in front of it. And, he went back a couple years later to see the finished building, which really didn't look very much like what he had originally sketched. He said, but those trees, they were right on. They got the trees right, but the building, they really butchered it. Which is, we get used to that. All right, I'm gonna go for some of my curve lines next. I'm gonna go for,
No one's seeing anything in those windows.
just doing the edge of the driveway now. I'll put that there. I'm gonna try and wing it with this stone wall a little bit. Now I'm gonna adjust some of this stuff. As I do it. Like, for example, I thought the stone wall was a little too fat in the back. All right, so I got most of the soft stuff in. I'm gonna put some of my, oh, I don't. Sorry, I'm getting so many layers of trace on here that it's tough to see what's underneath. And I probably, at this point, should give these trees some, at least the front ones, give them some trunks. I'll fluff those up a little more at the end.
Now it's not really an arb anymore.
That's a vertical arborvitae.
It's been limbed up.
Bad landscaping.
That's a Spanish arborvitae.
Oh my gosh.
No idea, just mix shit up. Okay, so now I'm gonna start putting in a lot of the hard lines. Okay, I'm gonna actually play a little game with my road. And that what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna bring that out a little bit. that off there. I'm bringing that up there. I'm just blocking out where my frame is.
This is so cool. Is this your favorite one to draw?
The perspective?
Yes.
I
What's your
like
favorite?
I like doing perspectives.
Okay.
It's actually, as far as drawing goes, elevations are fun.
Yeah.
Because they're pretty easy to draw. You can really crank them out. So I like doing those. And the reality is I don't draw perspectives very much. I do them on SketchUp and render them in that. So yeah, as far as what I like to do, I like drawing the elevations because they're easy and they look like fun. But I mean, my favorite is doing rendered. I love taking the time to do my SketchUp drawings and render them, and then throw some trees in Photoshop and you know, kind of. It doesn't quite look like a photo, but it looks very real, and people love it. They just. Think it's good fun. Same rules apply as with your elevations in that you want to be loosey-goosey, make sure you got lots of overlapping corners. If you're a little off on some of these, that's okay. So I'm trying to get that's a little off, but I don't care. See here, the line is at an angle, so I'm going to split it. I'm actually going to start from the top, come down, and make it straight. I'm putting double lines in for the trim. So I put that little break around where the trim hits it. That's just to accentuate where the trim is, which is how it would look for real or close to it. I'm going to go ahead and put another line on that chimney. And again, the more detail you can get into SketchUp, the less you have to wing. And it just becomes, again, a tracing exercise, which is a lot easier than trying to figure out, well, how much should that overhang be over? But it can be done either way. Straight edge there. Oh, got a little piece of trim here. All right, I'm going to start putting in some windows. I'm going to start on the inside. I'm going to do the quick little double lines just like we did on the elevations. And then I'm going to put some trim around them. These windows are a little deceiving because they're not centered under the gable, which one would have thought they would be. Do we have any keyboard players in the house? Anybody that played piano or organ?
I play piano.
Did you ever hear of an Etsy organ or Esty organ?
Nope.
Well, there used to be a brand of organ called Esty, and it was a big brand. A lot of places had them, homes had them, schools had them, churches had them. Well, they were all made in Brattleboro, Vermont. And this house was owned by Mr. Esty. And if you're in Brattleboro, and if you get the chance, it's fun to go there because it's kind of like the land that time forgot. If you can see the old Esty factory, it's wild because it's these old factory buildings. They're not super huge because, again, these were in the early 1800s, but a lot of them have, slate roofing shingles, but they're the walls. And it looks really cool. It's pretty wild.
Why do you have the plan for his house?
What's that?
Why do you have the plan for his house? What did you do for his house?
I didn't do, well, I did a lot, but this is a long story. All right, from my first job out of college in 1984 was with a firm called Ingram Wallace Architects, which was Michael Ingram and Tom Wallace. Michael Ingram would supposedly retire from architecture when he was 45 and moved down to Key West and just stopped doing the profession because it was driving him crazy.
That's my kind of guy.
He moved to Key West. He was doing architecture again within about 17 days of getting down there.
17
Right.
days of pina coladas.
What's the weather?
What happened, Michael was Michael, God bless him. All right, realize I started working for Michael in 1984. And I was in 84 in Manchester, New Hampshire. Things were very busy. And I narrowed it down to two firms, and Ingram Wallace was one of them, and Architects 4 was another one. And I wound up going with Ingram Wallace on a coin flip. I just said, I can't decide. Tails. Ingram Wallace it is. So I worked for them for about 7 years, and that's when Michael left and went down to the Keys, and his partner, Tom, and I reestablished the firm as Tennant Wallace. There's a good story to that, too. If you looked at the old Tennant Wallace logo, because I looked at Tom and I said, well, Tom, it should probably be Wallace Tennant. I'm the new kid here. And he said, no. Tennant Wallace is fine. And I thought, well, that's pretty magnanimous of Tom. And then he explained to me why he did it. Understand, his name was Tom Wallace. By making it Tennant Wallace, he figured if the firm didn't work out, he could still use the logo and change it to Tom Wallace Architects. So Tom's a smart guy. So I wasn't as delighted with Tom after that, but I could appreciate his good sense. He's smart. He was a smart guy. But Michael was a very gifted designer. He was also a madman.
Why?
Just, oh my God. Where do I start? He was, I shouldn't say it, but I will.
Don't forget you're recording.
I know, that's what I'm not gonna say. So, but I will say that Michael up here, he loved to party. He was a party guy. There are some people in the world, my wife's old boss at a firm she worked for, Larry, was the same way. It's, you ever go to Chamber of Commerce after hours or anything like that?
No.
Or business meet and greets?
Oh yes.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, those people get lit. Those parties can be pretty lit.
Well, they're okay, but it's usually, 700 realtors trying to get new leads or sell insurance. Everybody's in suits, everybody's networking. I go to those things and I'm very uncomfortable and it shows. I mean, I can have fun, but I'm not going to drink like a fish in front of these folks, and it's not my thing. I force myself to do it. Michael loved these things. He lived to be put in groups of strangers and have to mingle, and for him it was part of work, because he wasn't just being a nice guy. He was getting projects. He was marketing the whole time, and he would always be able to do it. And it's because he could come across as not doing it that he was so successful at doing it. I mean, when I'm there, it's me and the 6 civil engineers whose bosses made him go, and we're in the corner, we're supposed to get leads, and we're like, I don't know how to talk to these people. What are we doing here? When will this ever end? But for Michael, it was just like, oh boy, here we go.
It's like trying to pick somebody up at a bar.
Well, yeah, but there was more. It was, yeah.
I do this for work.
Yes,
all the time.
and he was good at it. It just flowed. It was fun for him, and it showed, and therefore people gravitated to him. And oh, the fun we had. Michael was, we were not known for being teetotalers back in the day. Michael had the greatest quote in the world. He got pulled over in his BMW on Route 101 coming back from the Portsmouth office at 2 a.m. going 95 miles an hour. The state cop pulled him over and said, "What's that I smell?" To which Michael's reply was, "It must be the scotch because you can't smell the water." Okay.
Oh my God. This was
The
in the
cop
80s,
gave him a
obviously.
warning
Oh my
and
God.
let him go home. If I said this, I'd still be in prison today.
Yeah.
Only Michael could get away with this. And he did. Well, at any rate, so Michael disappears. He's down in Key West. He owns a drag club down there called Aqua. And
Amazing.
yeah, he's a character.
On
And
New Year's Eve, they have a ruby slipper on Duval Street that they put a drag queen in, and they lowered it.
I'll bet some of them came
Yeah.
from Michael's bar, Aqua. He's got a great business down there. Well, so he went to Key West, and up here he's considered a madman. And he gets down there, and they're like, "Wait a minute, you're starting work before 10 o'clock in the morning." This guy's conservative.
Hemingway.
He's a business leader. He's got his shit together more than anybody else down here. And he wound up running for mayor. He was in charge of the historical review board. He did great, and he's still down there. But he bought this place in Brattleboro, and he bought it. This is a renovation to this house, and he's going to rent it during ski season and come up and spend a lot of time in the summer up here, and then rent his place in the Keys while he's down here.
Oh, that's incredible.
He's a smart guy, and it's what happened, Michael, and you should all remember this, because I grew up near Brattleboro. I grew up in Hinsdale. Well, I went to high school in Hinsdale. I say I grew up there. I knew the street he was buying this on. He said, "Well, I got a place on Elliott Street." And I'm thinking, well, back when I was on Elliott Street, it wasn't the greatest neighborhood. And I got there now, and it's not the greatest neighborhood. It's not bad, but it's not great. And I'm thinking, I don't know. And this house is in pretty rough shape. Well, when I first started working for Michael in the early 80s, he got involved with a bunch of old, beat-up buildings in the mill yard, the old Mill Row housing in Manchester. Nobody touched them. Nobody wanted them because they were full of homeless people. They were abandoned. They were falling apart. They said, you're crazy. You see what rents are in mill yard housing now? He made a smart move. He then went to Portsmouth and bought this. He worked on a project, got involved in a project that was right across from where the salt and scrap piles are, was Nobles Island Condominium. And they looked at him and they said, you're crazy. This is right near the scrap piles in Portsmouth. Who's ever going to want to be anything right near this? Price a home out at Nobles Island in Portsmouth. It's right near the hotels. I mean, it's blown up, just exploded. He then moved to Key West. And back then in Key West, you could get a place for some reasonable money. And he bought a couple places. And if he were to sell them, he would make 10 times what he put into them.
Yeah. Does he
So,
rent them? He rents them.
he will be renting it, and the numbers he's going to rent it for are staggering.
Yeah.
Staggering what he'll get. They're beautiful places, by the way. He's real good. All right. Now I'm going to put some of these grills in. Sorry, I got busy talking about Michael. So, if past history is any indication of future performance, we all probably want to run down to Brattleboro and buy places on Elliott Street. Because 20 years from now, that's going to be the place to be. He's just got a gift for knowing those kind of things. He's also a very good designer. He does a great job with design. And very nice to me. I mean, he was decent to me as a new architect and gave me a lot of opportunities that I might not have had in other firms. Part of that was because he's such a wonderful individual. The other part is because it was 1984. And the first question at every job interview, I got 7 job offers in a 14-day period when I came back looking for an internship. And the first question at every interview was not, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years? How can you benefit us? What are your long-term goals? Describe in less than 500 words what you feel is most important in art. No, none of that. It was, when can you start? It's like, do you have a pulse? Yep. Okay, well, you've met the qualifications. We need somebody to draw right away because everybody was so busy. All right, so I put in all the windows, and next I'm going to go to the texture, and then I'm going to start putting in shadows. And what else? What are some other things I would put in? Roof, I'm going to do the same. Doing half of the half, half of that, half of that. Now see here, because it's a perspective, it's unlike in the elevation where this is real important to get these lines in because it just looks like a rectangle. Here you can tell it's a gable roof because it's drawn in 3D. But I still like to get these lines in, and I still do it the same way with a half of a half to give it a little. But if you are in Key West, check out Aqua. I haven't been down there since he opened it up. But I had a friend who went, who he and his wife went down. He said, yeah, we were at the Keys. He said, I wound up going to a drag club with my wife. I said, oh yeah, what was the name of it? He said, Aqua. I said, I know the owner. Next time you go, and he said he had a blast. He said, it's not the place I normally go. He said, I had a lot of fun. And his wife had a real good time. It's And again, Michael was, he owned a restaurant and an inn up north, and he loved to, he just likes people and entertaining. He threw great parties. Oh my God, they were fun. His Christmas parties were the stuff of legends. All right, there's that. I'm gonna get some of this brick in. So that's why I'm doing the SD Oregon building. And he called me up and he didn't feel like drawing it, so he hired me to draft it. He did sketches and I did all the construction drawings for it. Two and three times because he kept changing his mind on stuff, which I remembered from working with him in the past. I said, yeah, this is not what it's going to be. This is what he thinks it's going to be now. It's not what it's going to be by the time he's done with it. I'll put in a little bit of clapboards. And again, with the clapboards, you're trying to go, you have to go back to the perspective lines, which is why I put in those little, and if you want to cheat when you do your SketchUp model, you can just put a texture in there that has lines in it. They have some siding, and you'll see, if you do, you can scroll ahead in that video. You don't have to watch all 3 hours of it. Well, you can. I'm trying to figure out who viewed it 43 times.
You might have some really good like search engine optimization on there. Advanced SketchUp.
Yeah.
Like that's
Oh yeah, and it's really not that advanced. It's advanced for what you're doing, but I'm guessing that, you know, people that are using SketchUp to design turbine parts aren't really considering this to be that advanced. But one guy subscribed. I thought it was a student, and I looked, and it's like, no. So I'll try and put out one every week. See if I can give up my day job. Something tells
Satisfy
me
the
that's
algorithm.
not going to happen. Again, just hinting at a lot of this. You know, it gets tough at a small scale to put a lot of texture in. So we're just going to hint at it. Throw a few clapboards in there, call it good. Now, when I'm doing these clapboards, what I'm doing to try and match the perspective lines, if you'll notice, I'm lining my triangle up with the mullions in these windows, because that will be the same as the lines on this. It's all going back to the same vanishing point. Well, that one wasn't because I slipped, but hopefully no one will notice. Okay, if this was an elevation, well, I'm going to do some stuff that wasn't an elevation. But, well, let me ask, if this was an elevation, what would you do next?
profile line.
Profile, what else? Shadows, someone say shadows? Those are the two things I was thinking of. So, we're going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to get ground texture on it, because you'll start to see it's a good idea to slip the piece of paper under there. All right, you can kind of see that this looks pretty empty.
Dang, that looks nice.
Oh, it's okay.
You're
It's
real
all
good
right.
at this.
It's all right. It's I'm having fun. So let's get some shadows in first. I'm going to start with the tops of my windows. Watch what happens when I put these
Ooh,
shadows in. If you
yes.
thought that looked nice,
That just puts it right over the edge.
it just it all of a sudden is gonna start looking a lot more like a building. I'm gonna have a little shadow under this. I'm doing my diagonal shadows first. Now we're gonna have a shadow there. All right, now I can start getting the verticals on. I don't go super crazy with the verticals. I just kind of. There's another horizontal I want to put in, excuse me. Because this is actually a piece of trim. That's a little bit of trim. All right, verticals on the windows. Now, I'm going to try something. No, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I was going to try some, but I'm not going to. That works fine. I'm trying not to drag my triangle through the wet Sharpie. Sharpie's getting tired. That's okay. All right, so now we got the profile line on. See how it's starting to come off the page quite a bit? All right, last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start working on some ground texture. First thing I'm going to do is do that. First thing I'm going to do is finish this driveway. Close enough.
No shadows on the trees?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, I don't put shadows on the trees. I'm going to go ahead and put that little W stroke around all the hard and soft surfaces, just like I did on the plan. I'm also going to do it by the building, unless there's a hard surface going up next to it. Yeah, while on the discussion of trees and the perspective, we were doing, I was probably a sophomore or junior in architectural school, and we had to do a nursing home project. And our teacher was rather unique, which is a kind way of describing him, but into nursing homes, and he was probably in his mid-30s, and really into elderly people and dying, and a very unusual into person. But he was into nursing homes, which turns out was pretty much a growth industry. But he wasn't a,
Keep getting old.
he's a smart man, looking at demographics. But we were all struggling with him. And none of us were having much luck coming up with a decent one. And Margot, who was a very good designer, was struggling also. But we had to do an illustration of the outside, and Margot did. We had to do a perspective, and this is what Margot's perspective looked like. Tree, bridge, a little curve on it and a little railing, another tree, some shrubs, and sky. And that was her building. This little postage stamp in the back. She puts the board up, and we're all like, you gotta be kidding me, Margot. They bring in a guest critic. The guest critic goes right over to hers and says, "This is beautiful. Look at all the softening with the landscape and how they've paid attention to this." We were ready to shoot him. We were just like, "Stick to the building." Okay, I like putting some dewberries, just little speckles and stuff at the bottom of my trees, so they don't look like they're just hanging off in space. And then what am I going to do with all that open grass area? Any ideas?
You're gonna put the lines.
You bet I
Line it
am.
up. No, I like them. I like the hash lines for the sky on this too. That looks really nice.
Yeah,
The
it
stripe?
looks- It looks good in perspective,
Yeah.
and in elevation, I still don't.
I've come around. I like them now.
Now, I'm kind of going not entirely to vanishing points, but somewhat. Notice how all of a sudden all that empty space doesn't look so empty anymore, which is good. Anything I'm forgetting? I can't think of anything, but you guys have picked up on a few things in the past. I say we call that good. What do you think?
Yeah.
All right, so, I mean, it's, I don't like the way, just a minute. My marker kind of went belly up there. There, I like that better. That made all the difference in the world. Actually, see, this is what happens. I'm gonna put a. I know, it's been 15 minutes.
Yeah, it should be like chopped. Get 15 minutes and then you
Yeah.
put the triangle down
That's
and
time.
stuff.
Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to do this in 15 minutes.
If you put a scale, in here?
No, you wouldn't, because nothing's to scale. You wouldn't have a north arrow, and you wouldn't have a scale. You could say north view, south view, whatever that was, but there's no north arrow. Well, I mean, in theory, I'm not gonna put it on, this is why I'm bringing up piece of paper. I mean, I think it looked kind of silly, but you could do,
How about we have him do that 7 more times so we don't have to do the assignments ourselves. So that's
hang on. See, I would find this wicked distracting, but. And you could call that a north arrow,
No.
Yeah.
but don't. Yeah, I mean, it looks like something in the street. No, it's,
Kids doing chalk drawings or something like that.
all right, why don't we, let me see what my plan, I had a plan. And I think what I was gonna do was, great, all right, so how are we doing for time? I'm actually a little ahead of schedule, which is great. There's a first time for everything. All right, let me stop the tape before I say something I regret.